In 1987, the Harper family vanished from their rural farmhouse without a trace. Food was still warm on the table. Their car sat in the driveway. But what investigators found inside the locked pantry changed the case forever. Tonight, we're opening the door to a 30-year-old disappearance, a family erased, a house that remembers, and a pantry no one was meant to see inside. If you enjoy unraveling chilling mysteries like this one, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. The pantry door had no reason to be locked. Deputy Alan Mercer stood in the Harper farmhouse kitchen, staring at the plain wooden door. The table was set for dinner, plates of pot roast now cold, a glass of milk tipped onto the floor, drying in a chalky smear. Upstairs, the beds were unmade, children's toys scattered. No blood, no bodies, just absence. The lock was strange. A heavy brass mechanism on the outside bolted into the frame, as if someone had wanted to keep something in. Alan reached for the handle. It rattled, resisting. "Get me a crowbar," he said, his voice tight. Another officer handed one over. Alan braced himself, the metal groaning as he wedged it into the frame. The pantry gave a shuddering crack. The door swung open. The smell hit first, stale air, something damp, metallic. He lifted his flashlight. The beam revealed shelves lined with jars of preserves, bags of flour, and a notebook. Its cover was dark with stains, resting on the floor against the wall. Alan bent down and picked it up. On the first page, written in a child's scrawl, "Don't let her out." His stomach tightened. He looked over his shoulder toward the empty house. A chill crept through him, as if the walls themselves had heard him break the silence. The pantry door, though now open, seemed heavier than it should have been. The farmhouse stood empty for 30 years. Weeds claimed the front steps. Rain stripped the roof bare, and raccoons nested in the attic. Teenagers in the county told each other dares. Spend a night in the Harper house and you'll hear scratching from the pantry. But no one ever lasted more than an hour. By the time journalist Clare Redmond pulled up in her rusted Subaru, the place looked less like a home and more like a skeleton. She sat for a long moment, engine idling, watching the windows. They watched back. She had grown up hearing whispers of the Harper family disappearance. David and Carol Harper, their 2 children, and Carol's elderly father. October 1987. Vanished overnight. No signs of struggle, no bodies ever found. The case had gone cold within a year, and the farmhouse was sold back to the bank. But the notebook found in the pantry, that had never been released to the public. Claire only learned of its existence 2 months ago, when she filed a request for old evidence logs. And now here she was. She shut off the engine, the sudden quiet pressing in. A crow launched from the roof with a rough caw, startling her. She slung her bag over her shoulder and stepped out into the crisp autumn air. Inside, the farmhouse smelled of rot and time. Wallpaper curled from damp plaster. Her flashlight swept across empty rooms, dust dancing in its beam. She whispered to herself, a nervous habit. Living room, kitchen, pantry. The kitchen was still recognizable. The old oak table sat in the center, chairs tucked under except one that lay on its side. Cabinets hung open, some stripped bare, others with broken dishes inside. And there it was, the pantry door. Even after all these years, the lock was still bolted back into place, as if someone had closed it after the family vanished. Claire's throat tightened. She ran her fingers across the brass, the cold metal gritty with rust. Her recorder clicked on with a soft beep. October 3rd, 2017. She spoke into it. Entering the Harper farmhouse pantry. Door shows signs of forced entry in 1987. Lock still intact. Visual inspection, scratches along the inside frame. She pulled out a small crowbar from her bag. The wood splintered easily, the frame brittle with age. The door creaked open. The smell hadn't faded. Stale, damp. A faint sweetness, almost sickly. She raised her flashlight. The shelves were empty now. Only a few glass jars toppled in the corner. But she saw them. Deep scratch marks gouged into the wood along the inside of the door. Too high for a child, too frantic for an animal. Her heart pounded. She lifted her recorder. Scratches on interior appear human-made, vertical. Depth suggests repeated force. She crouched lower. On the floor lay a shard of glass. She turned it in her hand and saw faint lines etched into it, as if someone had tried to carve words into the floorboards. She leaned closer. The letters spelled one word. Down. Claire's breath caught. She tapped the wood beneath her feet. Hollow. Her flashlight beam traced the seams of the floorboards. Just visible under years of dust, she saw the outline of a hatch. Claire's hands hovered over the hatch. Dust caked the edges, the wood swollen with decades of moisture, but the outline was unmistakable. A door beneath a door. Her throat tightened. Journalist instincts, she whispered to herself, her voice shaky. Or horror movie mistake. She set her recorder on the floor beside her. October 3rd, 2017. Discovery of a concealed hatch inside the Harper pantry. Approximate dimensions, 3 by 2 feet. Appears hand-cut, not factory-built. Her crowbar slid between the seams. The wood groaned as she pried, flakes of rot flaking onto her jeans. The hatch popped with a sharp crack, revealing a square of blackness beneath. Cold air exhaled up, earthy and damp. She swung her flashlight down. Wooden steps, narrow and steep, disappeared into the dark. Claire forced a steady breath. She had expected rot, mold, maybe some vermin nests. Not this. Her recorder captured the tremor in her voice. Underground chamber confirmed. I'm going in. She descended slowly, one step at a time. The wood creaked beneath her weight, each groan threatening to snap. At the bottom, her boots sank into soil, packed hard as stone. The air smelled of rust and mildew. Her flashlight revealed a small square chamber. Stone walls, rough and damp. A low ceiling barely higher than her head. The far wall bore something darker, streaks across the stone. She moved closer. Handprints, dozens of them. Pressed into the damp rock, smeared as if clawing for purchase. Claire's chest tightened. She raised her recorder. Walls show evidence of repeated human contact, handprints, smearing consistent with attempts to escape. She turned. Against the opposite wall sat a wooden crate, its lid broken. Inside were scraps of cloth, a child's dress sleeve, faded yellow, a pair of shoelaces knotted together, a tin lunchbox with cartoon astronauts on it. She froze. She remembered seeing that lunchbox before in a black and white newspaper clipping. The Harper boy, Thomas, had been photographed with it on his first day of school. Her hands shook as she snapped photos. Each flash made the chamber look like a crime scene frozen in time. Then she noticed the carvings. Near the floor, scratched deep into the stone with something sharp, were words. She traced them with her fingers, reading aloud. Keep her in. A shiver swept through her spine. She whispered into her recorder, barely able to hear her own voice over the pounding of her pulse. Inscription found. Matches message in recovered pantry notebook. Don't let her out. Language indicates containment. Subject unknown. Her flashlight flickered. She tapped it, the beam sputtering before steadying again. The silence pressed on her ears. The kind of silence that seemed to breathe. Then she heard it. Faint, distant. A dragging sound. Not from above. From behind the wall. Her body stiffened. She raised the light, pointing it at the far corner. The wall looked solid, but the sound came again. A faint scrape, like fingernails dragging slowly across stone. Claire stumbled back, her breath quickening. The recorder slipped from her hand, clattering on the floor. The sound stopped. She stood frozen, staring at the wall, her flashlight trembling in her grip. Minutes passed. No sound, no movement. Finally, she crouched to retrieve the recorder. Her voice shook as she spoke. Unidentified auditory anomaly detected from the east wall. Scraping, dragging sound. Duration: approximately 10 seconds. Source undetermined. She forced herself up the stairs, every step groaning as if resisting her escape. When she reached the pantry, she slammed the hatch shut and backed away, her chest heaving. She needed air. She stumbled out into the yard, collapsing against her car. The autumn wind cut sharp against her sweat-soaked skin. The farmhouse loomed behind her, its windows empty, its door yawning open like a mouth that had just whispered something she wasn't meant to hear. Claire sat with her head in her hands, forcing herself to breathe. She thought of the Harper family's smiling photos in the old newspaper archives. She thought of the lunchbox, and she thought of the words scratched into the wall. Keep her in. She didn't yet know who her was, but she knew now why the case had haunted this county for 30 years. Because maybe the Harpers hadn't vanished at all. Maybe they'd been keeping something locked away. And maybe someone, or something, was still down there. Claire didn't sleep that night. Back in her motel room, the cheap air conditioner rattled against the wall, but she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her recorder sat on the nightstand, its little red light blinking with every breath she took, as if reminding her of what she had found beneath the Harper pantry. The words kept circling her mind. Don't let her out. Keep her in. Who was her? At 2 a.m, she gave up on sleep. She propped herself up against the thin pillows and opened her laptop. The motel's Wi-Fi was spotty, but enough for old archives. She pulled the Harper case files she'd assembled over months of research. Newspaper scans, police statements, faded photographs. The family photo showed David Harper with his thick-rimmed glasses and pressed shirt. His wife Carol with a quiet, reserved smile. Their son Thomas clutching his astronaut lunchbox, and little Mary in a yellow dress, clutching a rag doll. The official timeline was thin. October 17th, 1987. Neighbors reported the Harpers hadn't shown up for church. Police arrived to find the house intact, dinner unfinished, pantry locked. Search dogs picked up no scent trail. The only anomaly was the notebook in the pantry, now locked away in evidence storage. By November, searches had been called off. Rumors filled the vacuum. Some whispered about financial troubles, that David had staged a disappearance. Others claimed Carol had been unstable, that she'd taken the children away. But no one could explain the notebook. Claire leaned closer to the screen. The handwriting analysis, buried in a corner of the case file, had concluded the scrawled, "Don't let her out" matched a child's hand. Likely Thomas, age 10. But what 10-year-old writes something like that in a pantry notebook? Claire rubbed her eyes. She'd interviewed a lot of people in her years as a journalist, chasing cold cases. But this one felt like it had roots deeper than paper trails. Her phone buzzed, startling her. A local number. She hesitated, then answered. "Miss Redmond." The voice was gravelly. Male, cautious. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Alan Mercer. You don't know me, but I was a deputy on the Harper case. I heard you were in town." People talk. Claire sat up straighter. "Deputy Mercer?" "You were the first one in the house." Silence. Then, "Yeah, I was. And I've regretted it for 30 years. Her pulse quickened. "Would you be willing to meet?" A pause, then a sigh. "Tomorrow, noon. Old diner on Route 11. Don't tell anyone." The line went dead. Claire stared at her phone, her heart racing. Mercer was a ghost in the records, mentioned briefly but never quoted. Why now, after 3 decades? She closed her laptop, slid the recorder into her bag, and tried to calm the pounding in her chest. Tomorrow she'd have answers, or more questions. The diner smelled of fried grease and coffee grounds, its vinyl booths cracked with age. Ceiling fans stirred the heavy air, clinking their chains. Clare sat in a corner booth, recorder hidden in her bag, watching the door. Alan Mercer walked in at exactly noon. He was older now, hair gone white, his frame stooped, but his eyes, sharp and restless, scanned the room like a man who still carried his badge, even if it had been surrendered years ago. He slid into the booth without greeting. His hands shook slightly as he reached for a cup of coffee the waitress had set down. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered. "You called me," Clare replied softly. His lips twitched, almost a smile. "Guess I did." "I saw what you did yesterday." At the house, Clare stiffened. "You were there?" "Not inside, but I knew someone was poking around. That place." He rubbed his temples. "It doesn't let go easy." "Tell me what you saw in 1987, Clare urged. Mercer's eyes darkened. "We went in expecting a domestic dispute, maybe a runaway wife. But the second I saw that pantry door, I knew better. That lock wasn't for keeping kids out of snacks. It was for keeping something inside." Clare leaned closer. "And the notebook?" Mercer's jaw tightened. "Thomas wrote it," they said. "But Thomas couldn't write like that. Those letters were carved in hard, like someone pressing until the pencil broke. Fear in every line." He sipped his coffee, hands trembling. "We opened that door, and it smelled wrong. Damp, like something had been alive in there too long. The notebook was on the floor, and above it—" He stopped, his throat working. "Above it?" Clare pressed. "Scratches," he whispered. "Fresh, like someone had clawed at the door. But here's the thing. We dusted for prints. None matched the family. None." Clare's skin prickled. "Whose then?" "We never knew. State pulled me off the case when I started asking too many questions. Said I was scaring the town with ghost stories." He gave a bitter laugh. "But I know what I heard that night." Clare's pulse hammered. "You heard something?" Mercer nodded slowly. "When we stood in that kitchen, pantry door hanging open, we heard breathing. Deep, slow. From under the floorboards, the diner noise seemed to dim. Clare could hear only her own breath, quick and shallow." "Did you investigate?" "They shut it down. Ordered the hatch sealed. Said it was an old root cellar, nothing more. But I know what I heard. And sometimes—" His eyes darted around the diner before he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Sometimes I still hear it. At night, like it followed me." Clare swallowed hard. "Then why tell me now?" Mercer's eyes glistened. "Because you opened it again. And if you're not careful, you'll let her out." The words hung between them, heavy as chains. The waitress clattered plates at another booth, breaking the spell. Mercer slid from the seat. "This is the last time we talk. Forget the Harpers, forget the pantry. Walk away." He left without another word, the bell above the door jingling in his wake. Clare sat frozen, her coffee untouched. She couldn't walk away. Not now. The rain started as Clare drove back toward the Harper farmhouse. Thin at first, then heavier, streaking across her windshield in blurred rivers. The wipers squealed against the glass, their rhythm matching her heartbeat. Alan Mercer's words played over and over in her head. "You'll let her out." She gripped the wheel tighter, jaw clenched. She wasn't here to walk away. She was here to finish what others had left buried. The farmhouse appeared like a shadow on the hilltop, its roofline jagged against the stormy sky. She parked on the gravel drive, headlights slicing through sheets of rain. The car felt safe, contained, but she forced herself out into the downpour, camera bag slung over her shoulder. Inside, the air was colder than she remembered. The wind howled through broken panes upstairs, making the house seem alive with whispers. She set her recorder on the kitchen counter, its red light blinking. October 4th, 2017. Returning to Harper Farmhouse for second inspection. Focus, pantry, and substructure. Rain conditions present. Unstable atmosphere. She aimed her flashlight at the pantry door. The hatch below still bore her pry marks from the day before. Dust and dirt scattered across the floor where she'd broken it open. Kneeling, she pulled the hatch wide. The earthy air rose again, stronger this time, tinged with metal. She swallowed against the nausea clawing at her throat. She descended, step by cautious step. The chamber looked the same, stone walls, handprints, the crate of relics. But the smell was sharper. Her light swept across the wall, and she froze. The handprints had multiplied. Yesterday there had been a dozen, faint and smeared. Now dozens more crowded the stone, overlapping, fresher. The streaks glistened as if damp. Her stomach turned. She whispered into her recorder. New handprints observed. Unclear if prior oversight or new appearance since last inspection. Pattern suggests continuous presence. Her beam landed on the crate. The astronaut lunchbox sat open now, lid pushed back. Inside, something new lay on top of the faded cloth scraps. A tooth, small, white, perfectly intact. Her fingers shook as she picked it up with a tissue. It looked like a child's molar, root still attached. She snapped photos, each flash making the walls shudder with light. Then, faintly, beneath the echoes, she heard it again, dragging, slow. From behind the far wall, she stiffened, flashlight trembling. This time, the sound didn't stop. She backed up the stairs, her recorder capturing every ragged breath. At the top, she slammed the hatch shut and stumbled into the kitchen. Rain pounded the roof, a drumbeat over her racing pulse. Claire pressed her back against the counter, clutching the recorder. October 4th, 2017. Evidence suggests ongoing anomaly in substructure. Physical objects not present on prior inspection. Auditory presence confirmed. Conclusion: not abandoned. Not empty. The words didn't calm her. She left the house in a rush, rain soaking her clothes as she scrambled into her car. Her hands shook as she jammed the keys into the ignition. Headlights flared across the drive and lit up another car parked on the shoulder of the road. She froze. A man sat inside, barely visible through rain-streaked glass. He wasn't moving, just watching. Her headlights caught the license plate, rain distorting the numbers. She squinted, tried to focus, but then the engine of the other car roared to life. The vehicle pulled away, tires spitting gravel, vanishing into the curtain of the rain. Claire's pulse thundered. Someone else was watching the Harper house, and maybe they had been waiting for her to open the pantry. Back in her motel, she spread her photos across the bedspread. The tooth, the handprints, the crate. The images felt wrong under the bland motel lamp, as if they carried the cellar's air into the room. She couldn't stop staring at the lunchbox. Her laptop buzzed with an incoming email. Anonymous sender. The subject line read, "Stop digging." Inside, one sentence. "You're not the first to go down there. You won't be the last. No signature, no attachments." Her mouth went dry. She shut the laptop, heart pounding, the storm outside beating against the window like fists. The Harper farmhouse wasn't abandoned. It was being guarded. Sleep didn't come. Claire lay awake in the motel bed, rain still drumming faintly against the windows, the anonymous email replaying in her head. "You're not the first to go down there. You won't be the last." Who else had been in that cellar, and why leave a warning instead of a threat? At 5:30 a.m., she gave up trying to rest. She packed her laptop, camera, and recorder, then drove to the county archives, a low brick building attached to the courthouse. The air inside smelled of dust and old paper, and the fluorescent lights hummed faintly. The clerk on duty, a gray-haired woman with reading glasses, peered at Claire with curiosity when she asked for property deeds. "You're looking into the Harper place?" the woman asked, her voice soft but weighted. Claire nodded. "I'm investigating the disappearance." The clerk's lips pressed tight, as though holding back words. That house should have been burned to the ground. She shuffled through drawers, eventually producing brittle documents bound with twine. Clare signed them out, spreading them across a table. The farmhouse deed went back to 1946, ownership shifting from Harper's to distant cousins, then to bank repossession in 1991. But what stopped Clare cold was a set of renovation permits from 1972. The pantry had been modified. Reinforced walls, new foundation poured. And the contractor listed? M. Carroway Construction. Clare jotted the name down. Carroway. It rang faintly in her memory, though she couldn't place it. She flipped through the permits again. Notes in the margins scribbled in fading ink. Installs secondary access. Owner insists on concealment. Her chest tightened. The cellar hadn't always been there. It was built, deliberately, secretly. She photographed the pages, then turned to police files. They were thinner than expected. Missing persons reports from 1985. Interviews with neighbors. Nothing substantial. A sheriff's note suggested possible runaway theory, even though the Harpers had been a family with no debt, no known trouble. The final page chilled her more than the cellar. A notation. Evidence not logged. Pantry hatch sealed under direct order. No explanation, no follow-up. She whispered to herself, they knew. The room suddenly felt suffocating. Clare closed the folder, thanked the clerk, and hurried outside into the weak morning light. She drove to the library, an older building with creaking floors and tall windows. Microfilm readers lined one corner, glowing faintly. She scrolled through newspapers, searching the late 1980s. Small articles mentioned the Harper family's disappearance, but coverage had been sparse. One local editorial asked why the investigation had been so quiet. Another mentioned a volunteer search cut short due to unsafe conditions. Clare pressed her forehead to her hand. Patterns emerged. Silences, redactions, distractions. Someone had wanted the farmhouse forgotten. Her phone buzzed. A voicemail. Alan Mercer's voice rasped through the speaker. You went back, didn't you? Don't call me again. Don't bring them here. You're opening doors you can't close. The message ended in static. Clare sat frozen in the library cubicle, her pulse hammering. Alan knew. He knew what was behind that wall. By evening, she returned to the farmhouse. The storm had passed, leaving the fields drenched and glistening under pale light. The house loomed in silence, windows reflecting the fading sun. This time, she wasn't alone. A sheriff's cruiser was parked in the driveway. Sheriff Halbrook, broad-shouldered with a face cut from stone, stepped out as she approached. His uniform was neat, badge polished, but his eyes were wary. You the reporter? He asked. Yes, Clare Redmond. His gaze lingered on her recorder. This house is county property. Unsafe. Shouldn't be here. I have reason to believe evidence was ignored in the Harper case, she said evenly. The pantry cellar. His face tightened. That basement's off limits. Why? Because it wasn't there until 1972? Because it was reinforced for concealment? The sheriff's jaw flexed. He didn't answer. She stepped closer. What's in there, Sheriff? Who are you protecting? The silence between them stretched. Finally, he said, You think the Harpers were the first family to vanish in that house? His tone carried no mockery, just resignation. Clare's stomach dropped. What do you mean? The sheriff looked past her at the house, its siding peeling in the twilight. There's more than one set of names tied to that property, and some of us have been trying to keep them buried. The air grew heavy, pressing against her chest. Before she could respond, a sound broke the silence. Faint, but clear. From inside the farmhouse. A child's voice, distant, muffled, rising through the walls, calling for help. The sound froze both of them in place. Clare's skin prickled as the faint cry rose again, seeping through the boards of the farmhouse. It was soft, fragile, unmistakably a child's voice. "Help me." Sheriff Halbrook's face paled beneath the brim of his hat. He stepped forward, hand instinctively dropping to the pistol at his side. "You heard that," Clare whispered. The sheriff didn't answer. He strode toward the porch, boots crunching on wet gravel. Clare followed, recorder still running in her hand. The door groaned open. Inside, the air was heavier than before, damp wood and mildew pressing against her lungs. The house seemed to pulse around them, each creak magnified. The voice came again, louder, from below. Clare's stomach tightened. "It's coming from the cellar." Halbrook spun toward her, eyes hard. "Stay here." He moved down the hall, every step echoing in the emptiness. Clare refused to stay back. She followed, her light cutting across the warped wallpaper and dust-thick banister. At the pantry door, the sheriff hesitated. His broad hand rested on the handle of the hatch. The air that rose from below smelled of rust and damp earth. He muttered something under his breath. A prayer, maybe. Then he opened it. The voice rose clearer now, thin, desperate, echoing from the darkness. "Please, it's cold down here." Clare's throat closed. This was no recording, no trick of memory. The cry was alive. The sheriff descended first, flashlight beam trembling against the stone. Clare followed, her recorder capturing every sound. The cellar looked unchanged. Handprints smeared across the walls, the crate in the corner, the lunchbox, the faint sound of dripping water. But the voice was here, close. "Who's down here?" Halbrook demanded, his deep voice reverberating. No answer. Clare swept her light across the far wall. Her breath hitched. The mortar between the stones was cracked. Damp earth bled through as if something had pressed against it from the other side, and in the center of the wall, a hole, no wider than her hand. From it, the child's voice whispered, "Don't let him put me back." Clare staggered back. "Sheriff, there's someone behind there." Halbrook's face hardened. He shook his head. "No, that wall's sealed. It's been sealed for decades." "Then explain the voice," Clare snapped. His flashlight trembled. "I told you. You're opening doors you can't close," the voice whispered again, weaker this time. "Please." Clare dropped to her knees, pressing her ear to the damp stone. Her skin chilled. She could hear faint breaths, ragged, shallow, as though someone were pressed against the wall from the other side. Her hand lifted, trembling toward the crack. The stone was ice cold, damp enough to beat on her fingertips. And then something touched her. Tiny fingers pressing through the crack, brushing her skin. She gasped, jerking back. "Sheriff!" Halbrook pulled her away roughly, slamming the hatch closed. The cellar went black behind them. "No!" Clare cried, struggling against him. "There's someone alive down there. Enough!" His voice roared through the kitchen, but it cracked with fear. He was sweating, his face drawn tight. He released her arm, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. Finally, he stopped, hands braced against the counter. "You think you're the first reporter to chase the Harpers?" His voice was low now, ragged. "You're not. Every 10 years or so, someone comes back, and every time, that voice comes with them." Clare's breath caught. "Every time." He nodded slowly, eyes empty. Different voices. Sometimes a girl, sometimes a boy, sometimes more than one. Always begging. Always behind that wall. Clare's recorder blinked red from the counter, catching every word. "So what happened to the Harpers?" she demanded. Halbrook's shoulders sagged. "We never found them." Not a body, not a scrap. Just that voice, calling for help. And the more we dug, the louder it got. Clare's stomach turned. "And you sealed it." "We had to. Or it spreads." His voice trembled now, stripped of authority. "The sheriff before me, my uncle, he told me once. The Harper case wasn't the first. There were families before them, others after. That house doesn't take them all at once. It eats them. Slowly." The kitchen went silent except for their ragged breathing. Clare whispered, "Then who built that cellar?" Halbrook didn't meet her eyes. The Carroway family. They were contractors, but more than that. They knew about the house. They built the chamber to hold it in, to keep the voices from spreading. But it never worked. Clare's mind reeled. Carroway. The same name from the permits. The same name she had written down in the archive. The same name Mercer had hinted at. Her hands trembled as she retrieved her recorder. "Sheriff, this is evidence." "This can't stay buried." Halbrook's expression darkened. "Be careful, Ms. Redmond. Evidence is one thing, but once you put their names in print, they'll know you." And the house doesn't let go. Clare stared at him, her pulse thundering. For the first time since she'd started this investigation, she wondered if she was the one being hunted. The motel room smelled faintly of damp carpet and old cigarette smoke. Clare sat cross-legged on the bed, laptop open, recorder beside her. She replayed the sheriff's words again and again, each crackle of his voice pulling her deeper into the knot. Different voices, always behind the wall. The Carroways built the chamber. Her notes sprawled across yellow legal pads, timelines, names, cross-references. The Carroway name appeared again and again. Contractors, custodians, always circling back to the farmhouse. Her email pinged. Another anonymous message. This one contained a single attachment, a scanned newspaper clipping. She opened it. The headline, "Local Girl Missing, Search Ends in Tragedy, 1961. The article described an 8-year-old named Evelyn Carroway, vanished from her family's farm. Neighbors joined in the search, but after 3 days, the sheriff at the time had called it off. The article mentioned a grieving father, a construction foreman named Micah Carroway. Clare's chest tightened. The same name from the renovation permits. The same bloodline tied to the Harper cellar. The clipping wasn't signed, but she didn't need a signature. She knew who had sent it. Alan Mercer. She found him again at the diner. Same corner booth, same untouched coffee. His shoulders hunched as if expecting her. Clare slid into the seat across from him, recorder on the table between them. "You sent me the clipping." He didn't deny it. His eyes stayed on the window, where the rain left thin streaks down the glass. "That girl was Evelyn Carroway," Clare pressed. "Micah's daughter. She disappeared in 1961. That's 24 years before the Harpers. And her father was the one who reinforced the farmhouse cellar." Alan's jaw clenched. "You should leave." "I can't, because I think Evelyn was the first voice in those walls." His eyes flicked to hers, sharp, pained. "You don't know what you're saying." "I do. I heard it. Sheriff Halbrook heard it too. She was calling for help. Micah sealed her in, didn't he? He built the chamber to keep her there." Alan finally spoke, voice gravelly, low. "It wasn't Micah. It was the house. He built the chamber to hold it. But once you build a prison, you need a prisoner. That's the rule." Clare's stomach turned. "He sacrificed his own daughter?" Alan's fingers dug into the edge of the table. "No. He thought he was saving her. He thought if she was inside, the house would take her and stop. But it didn't stop. It never stops." The diner around them blurred, the hum of conversation distant. Clare leaned closer. "And the Harpers?" Alan's throat bobbed. His voice fell to a whisper. History repeated. Families vanish. Voices multiply, and every time someone goes down there, the house remembers. It feeds on being noticed. Clare's hands trembled as she turned off the recorder. "Then why tell me this? Why send the clipping if you don't want me to write?" Alan finally met her gaze. His eyes were bloodshot, haunted. "Because you've already gone too far. The moment you touch that wall, it knew you, and if you're not careful, you'll be the next voice behind it." That night, Clare dreamed of the cellar. The stone walls slick with damp, the handprints shifting like shadows. She walked toward the crack in the mortar. hearing the faint cries. But when she reached the wall, it wasn't tiny fingers that touched hers. It was her own hand, reaching back through the stone, pale and cold, dragging her inward. She woke gasping, drenched in sweat, the motel clock glowing 3:33 a.m. Her recorder, which she hadn't touched since the diner, was blinking. She lifted it with shaking hands, pressed play. Her own voice filled the room. "I'm cold. Please don't put me back." The recorder clattered to the carpet. Claire pressed herself against the headboard, hands trembling. The room felt too small, too close. Somewhere out there, the farmhouse waited, and the house had already claimed her voice. Morning brought no relief. The motel curtains let in a gray sliver of light that only sharpened Claire's exhaustion. She hadn't slept after the recorder incident, her mind circling the same question. How had her voice ended up on the tape? By 8 a.m., she was back at the courthouse. The clerk from before eyed her warily but handed over the county registry without protest. She traced the Carroway name through decades of property deeds, construction permits, tax records. Each page carried a shadow. Foremen, laborers, subcontractors, all clustered around rural builds. Many tied back to farmhouses. Several of those homes had their own dark history. Unexplained fires, families moving away suddenly, missing person reports that fizzled into silence. In the margins of one ledger, Claire saw a sheriff's signature. H. Halbrook, 1974. Her stomach tightened. Sheriff Halbrook's uncle, the same man who'd sealed the pantry cellar. The Carroways built the prison. The Halbrooks kept it closed. She drove out to the sheriff's home that evening, a low ranch-style house at the edge of town. His cruiser was parked in the drive, dust caked on its fenders. When he opened the door, his face was unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," he said flatly. "I need answers," Claire replied. "The Carroways, the Halbrooks. Your families have been tied to that house for half a century. Why?" He didn't move to let her in. "Because we didn't have a choice. Your uncle sealed the cellar. Did he know about Evelyn Carroway?" His eyes flickered. For a moment, something human cracked through the stone. "She wasn't the first." His voice was low, nearly a growl. "That house has always needed names. My uncle believed the Carroways were cursed, bound to feed it. My family." He stopped, jaw tightening. Claire pressed. "Bound to hide it." He finally stepped aside, motioning her in. The interior smelled of coffee and old paper. The sheriff led her to a study cluttered with maps, boxes of files, and shelves of binders. On the desk sat a thick folder marked Farmhouse. Restricted. "You want the truth?" he said, dropping heavily into a chair. "Then read." She opened the folder. Inside were brittle photographs of the Harper farmhouse taken across decades. One from 1961 showed deputies gathered outside, the Carroway men in overalls standing grim-faced in the background. Another from 1974 captured Sheriff Halbrook's uncle sealing the hatch with cement bags piled nearby. And then there was a photo dated 1985. Margaret Harper, pale and frantic, being held back by deputies while men in suits carried crates from the pantry cellar. Claire's pulse quickened. What was inside those crates? The sheriff looked away. Things that shouldn't exist. Relics that weren't from this time. Some said bones, others said smaller things. She thought of the tooth she'd found in the lunchbox. Her stomach knotted. Why cover it up? "Because once you name it, it grows," he said, voice shaking now. "Once the story spreads, more people hear the voices. And when they hear, the house finds them." Claire shut the folder. "That hasn't stopped anything. The voices are still there. Children are still missing." The sheriff's eyes burned with something between fury and despair. "You think I don't know that? Every time I walk into that house, I hear them. Sometimes my own daughter's voice. She's alive, grown, living in Dallas. But the house, it mimics her. It knows how to hurt me. The study fell silent, heavy with ghosts. Clare stood. Then help me expose it. If people knew. He slammed his fist onto the desk. If people knew, it would spread like wildfire. You'd turn one haunted farmhouse into 100. The outburst echoed, then faded. His shoulders sagged, and for the first time, she saw how hollowed out he was. He whispered, "You've already carried it with you, haven't you? Heard your own voice on a machine?" Her throat went dry. "Yes." He nodded slowly, grim. "Then it's already inside you, and it won't stop until you give it something back." That night, Clare sat in her car outside the farmhouse. The windows reflected her pale face, recorder on the dashboard. The sheriff's words pressed in. "It won't stop until you give it something back." The house loomed in the moonlight, silent, waiting. She lifted the recorder, pressed play. Her own voice spilled into the car, faint but clear. "Please don't put me back." Her stomach clenched. The farmhouse door creaked open on its own, though no wind stirred the fields. The house was calling her in. The farmhouse door groaned wider, as if pushed by unseen hands. Clare stepped out of her car, recorder in one hand, flashlight in the other. The night air smelled faintly of wet soil and rust. She whispered into the recorder, voice shaky. "October 7th, 2017, midnight entry. Harper Farmhouse. Suspected auditory phenomenon persists. House appears responsive." The boards creaked beneath her feet as she crossed the threshold. The kitchen lay ahead, familiar yet more oppressive than before. The pantry door stood open. The hatch gaped black. Her light cut across the floor. New handprints streaked up from the cellar, smeared across the pantry door, as though something had tried to claw its way out. Her breath caught. She lifted the recorder. Evidence of egress attempt. Handprints fresh. Moist. The sound came again, faint but closer now. A child's whisper. "It's cold. Please, don't shut it." Clare's knees weakened, but she forced herself down the hatch. The cellar air wrapped around her like wet cloth. Her flashlight beam quivered across the stone. The crate sat in the corner, but the lunchbox had toppled, its contents scattered. Scraps of fabric, the tooth, a small shoe that hadn't been there before. She bent to photograph it. Size 6. Worn leather. "Jesus," she whispered. The voice rose stronger now, not a whisper but a cry. "Let me out." It shook the cellar walls. Dust rained down from the beams above. Her light swung toward the far wall. The crack was wider. The mortar had crumbled, stone edges jagged, opening into a slit large enough to see dark earth behind. And a pale eye. Clare stumbled back, hitting the crate. She aimed her flashlight again, but the eye was gone. The whisper returned, softer now, mocking. Her own voice. "I'm so cold. Please don't put me back." Her skin crawled. The house was feeding on her. Behind her, a thud echoed. From upstairs. Someone else was in the farmhouse. She killed her light, crouching against the wall. Boots creaked above, heavy, deliberate. A man's silhouette crossed the hatch opening, blocking the faint moonlight. "Clare!" a voice called down. It was Alan Mercer. Her stomach twisted. "You need to stop," he said. His tone was pleading, not angry. "The Carroways couldn't contain it. The Halbrooks couldn't bury it. And you're waking it up." She forced her voice steady. "I saw an eye." Alan's breath shook audibly. "Not an eye. A reflection. It shows you what you most fear. That's how it breaks you down." "Then what about the children's voices?" She shot back. He hesitated. "Some are real. Some aren't. That's the cruelty of it. It traps pieces of them and uses them. That's why you can't trust what you hear." Clare's pulse hammered. "Then whose shoe is this?" She lifted it into the beam of her flashlight. Alan's face blanched. "That," he whispered, "was Evelyn's." The silence thickened. Clare stared at him. His jaw trembled. "She was my sister." The words landed like a blow. Alan's eyes glistened. "I was 12. I watched her vanish." Micah said the house had chosen. He built the chamber to hold her, said it would end with her, but she never stopped calling. And after her came the Harpers. And after them— He cut himself off, shaking his head. "It doesn't matter. It won't ever stop." Claire's throat burned. "Then help me expose it." "If we can prove." Alan's expression hardened. "Proof won't save you. It'll only spread it. Every person who reads your article will hear the voices. That's how it works. That's how it travels upstairs." A floorboard cracked sharply. Alan's head whipped toward the sound, his face drained of color. "Someone else is here." Before Clare could respond, the hatch slammed shut above them. Darkness swallowed the cellar. The voice rose from the wall. Dozens now, layered, crying, pleading, whispering, all overlapping, and threaded through them all, one cut clearer than the rest. It was her father's voice. "Claire, open the wall, please. I've been waiting for you." Her flashlight trembled in her hand. The stone seemed to pulse as if alive, breathing with the voices inside. Alan hissed, "Don't listen." But her father's voice came again, stronger. "It's me. You know it's me. Let me out." Claire's hand reached toward the crack before she realized what she was doing. The cellar was alive with voices. They overlapped in a desperate chorus. Children weeping, men shouting, women whispering lullabies turned sour. The stone walls seemed to breathe with them, damp air pulsing against Claire's skin. But through the noise, one voice cut clearer than all the rest. Her father's. "Claire, it's me. I've waited so long. Open the wall. Let me out." Her heart hammered, her throat tight. She hadn't heard his voice in 20 years. Not since the day he'd left and never returned. He wasn't a missing person, not like the Harpers. He'd simply walked out of their lives when she was 12, abandoning her and her mother. She had hated him for that. But hearing him now, raw, pleading, shook something deep. Alan gripped her wrist, voice urgent. "It's not him. The house knows your pain. It copies what hurts you most." Claire's hand trembled inches from the crack in the wall. The mortar was damp beneath her fingertips, crumbling at the edges. The voices swelled, overlapping, pressing. Her father again. "I'm cold, Claire. Please, don't leave me here." Her breath caught. For a moment, she wanted nothing more than to break the wall, to pull him out, to rewrite everything. Then heavy boots thundered overhead. The hatch creaked, then burst open. Sheriff Halbrook's silhouette loomed above, flashlight beam cutting into the cellar. "What the hell are you two doing?" His voice cracked with fury, but his face was pale, his eyes darting at the walls. Alan shouted up, "We can't hold it much longer." The mortar's breaking. The sheriff descended, light swinging wildly, his gaze locked on Claire. "You touched the wall, didn't you?" Her silence was answer enough. He cursed under his breath. "You've invited it closer." The voices rose in pitch, overlapping into a screech that made her ears ache. Dust shook loose from the ceiling beams. Halbrook pressed a hand against the wall, his jaw clenched. "It's worse than before." Its waking up Claire's flashlight flickered, then steadied on the crate. Something new sat atop the scraps inside, a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. She reached for it with trembling hands. The paper was brittle, edges crumbling, but the handwriting was clear. Evelyn Carroway, 1961, a diary page. Her eyes raced across the shaky scrawl. "Daddy says the house talks. He says I have to be brave. He says if I stay inside the pantry, the voices won't get out. But I don't like the dark. I hear them whispering. They say my name. They say they want me too." Claire's stomach lurched. The sheriff read over her shoulder, face grim. "Micah kept her down here," he muttered. "He believed it was the only way. A sacrifice to keep the rest of us safe. Alan's voice shook with fury. Safe? He killed her. And it didn't stop the house. It never stopped. The voices roared, drowning their argument. One slammed through louder than the rest. Evelyn's, high-pitched and furious. Let me out! The stone wall shuddered. Cracks spidered wider across the mortar. The air grew colder, wet with soil and iron. The sheriff grabbed Claire's shoulder, pulling her toward the stairs. We have to seal it again. Tonight, Alan blocked the steps, eyes wild. No, if we keep sealing it, more families will die. It's a cycle. We need to break it. We need to tear the wall down and end this. The cellar shook, dust falling in sheets. Claire stood between them, recorder clutched in her hand, her father's voice still echoing through the din. Claire, Alan urged, you've seen the truth. The Carroways built the prison, the Halbrooks buried it. Both failed. We can't keep covering this up, Halbrook barked back. You tear that wall down and you'll let it spread to everyone. Do you want the whole town hearing those voices? The choice pressed in, heavy as the stone itself. Claire's pulse thundered in her ears. On one side, Alan's desperation to expose the truth, to finally break the cycle. On the other, Halbrook's grim insistence that secrecy was the only barrier holding the horror in place. And beneath it all, her father's voice whispered again, soft now, coaxing. Just open the wall, Claire. Just once. For me, her hand trembled. For the first time, she wondered if she had already been chosen. The cellar pulsed with sound. The voices no longer whispered. They screamed, layered in anguish, fury, and grief. The stone walls groaned as if alive, cracks spreading like veins across the mortar. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Claire stood frozen, Alan on one side, Sheriff Halbrook on the other, both shouting over the din. Seal it, Halbrook bellowed. Break it open, Alan roared. Her father's voice sliced through them both, intimate, familiar. Claire, you know me. You know I wouldn't lie. Please, let me out. Her knees weakened. She pressed her hand against the wall. It was ice cold, but beneath the chill pulsed a faint warmth, like a heartbeat. Alan seized her arm. Think, Claire. That's not your father. It's what the house wants you to believe. She shook him off, chest heaving. But what if nothing? Halbrook cut in, eyes wild. You've heard every story, every family. You open that wall and you'll damn this whole county. The voices crescendoed, until she could barely hear her own thoughts. Children sobbing, men begging, women screaming. Evelyn's voice shrieked, Let me out! The wall bulged inward, soil spilling from the cracks. Something pressed against it from the other side. Claire's recorder blinked red, capturing everything. She lifted it to her mouth, voice shaking. October 7th, 2017. Subjective experience. Voices escalating. Structure unstable. Both containment and exposure argued. The wall cracked wide. A pale hand shot through, fingers gnarled and clawing. Dirt rained down as the arm stretched further, impossibly long, reaching toward her. Claire screamed, stumbling back. Alan leapt forward, trying to grab the arm, but his hands passed through it like mist. Halbrook yanked a pistol from his belt and fired. The report thundered in the confined space, ears ringing. The hand dissolved into dust, vanishing through the crack. The voices fell silent. For a moment, the cellar was still, the only sound their ragged breathing. Then, faintly, her father's voice whispered again. Why did you leave me, Claire? Tears stung her eyes. She clutched the recorder like a lifeline. That's not him. That's not him, she whispered, trying to convince herself. Alan's face was pale, sweat streaming down his temple. You see? It's feeding on you, on what you want. That's how it keeps you. Halbrook shoved past them, hauling open a crate in the corner. Inside were bags of cement mix, brittle with age. He threw one at Alan's feet. Help me seal it. Now. Before it's too late, Alan kicked the bag aside. You can't seal what won't stay sealed. Every time you do, more die, more vanish. The Carroways thought sacrifice was the answer. You thought silence was the answer. You were both wrong. The two men faced each other, decades of buried guilt and rage boiling over. Claire backed toward the stairs, torn, her recorder still blinking. She could publish everything, expose the Carroways, the Halbrooks, the cycle of vanishing families. She could end the silence. But if Halbrook was right, she might spread the voices beyond this farmhouse. She pictured hundreds of homes with cellar walls whispering, children pressing ears to cracks, hearing pleas that weren't theirs. The walls shuddered again. Another crack split wide, earth collapsing into the cellar. A face formed briefly in the soil, a child's, hollow-eyed, mouth open in a scream, before crumbling back to dirt. Alan grabbed Claire's shoulder. We tear it down together. We end it. Halbrook shoved him back. We seal it tonight. We bury it for good. Claire stood between them, heart hammering, the decision clawing at her insides. The voices rose again, all uniting into one deafening scream. Choose! The walls buckled, soil spilling, the ceiling beams groaning. Time was gone. Claire lifted the recorder to her mouth, breath shuddering. This is my choice. Claire's hand trembled around the recorder. Alan's grip on her arm was iron. Halbrook loomed, cement bag at the ready. The cellar shook violently, stones raining down, the wall splitting wider. Dozens of hands pushed through the gaps now, pale, grasping, flickering like smoke but solid enough to gouge the stone. Voices shrieked in unison, each one demanding release. Choose! Claire's chest heaved. Her father's voice wove through the chaos, low and steady. I've waited for you, Claire. I'm still here. Don't seal me in again. Tears burned her eyes. She remembered him walking out, leaving her and her mother. She remembered years of silence, absence. And now here he was, begging her. But Alan's words echoed just as loud. That's not him. It's what the house wants you to believe. Her breath shook as she raised the recorder. October 7th, 2017, she said, her voice breaking. Final note. The Harper cellar is not empty. It is alive. It uses grief, memory, and voices of the lost. It demands a choice. The ceiling cracked. Soil and wood thundered down, shaking the chamber. Alan seized her hand. Now, Claire! Tear it down! Halbrook grabbed her other arm, eyes wild. Seal it, or it will spread everywhere. The voices screamed louder, overlapping into a single roar. Her father's voice broke through one last time. Claire, please! And something in her hardened. She pulled free of both men, lifted her recorder, and shouted into the void. I choose the truth! She hurled the recorder into the crack. The red light blinked once, twice, then vanished into the soil. The cellar exploded with sound. Not screams this time, but a piercing wail, so loud it rattled her teeth. The hands flailed, then dissolved into dust. The wall collapsed inward, a wave of soil surging into the chamber. Alan dragged her toward the stairs. Halbrook stumbled behind, coughing as the cellar filled. They scrambled up, choking on dust, bursting into the kitchen as the hatch slammed shut under the weight of earth. The farmhouse shuddered once, groaned, then fell silent. Claire collapsed against the counter, chest heaving. Alan bent double, coughing, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. Halbrook leaned against the wall, pale and shaken. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then Claire whispered, It's recorded. Everything. Even if the recorder's buried, the truth's in there now. Alan's eyes were wet, his voice breaking. You may have just damned us all. Or saved us. Halbrook's gaze was hollow. You didn't seal it. You didn't destroy it. You fed it with your voice. God help us. Claire stood slowly, wiping grime from her face. No, I gave it the truth. That's what it wanted. That's what it's always wanted. The farmhouse creaked around them, settling back into silence. The storm outside had passed, leaving a pale moonlight to wash through the broken windows. Claire walked to the front door, every step heavy. She paused at the threshold, looking back once more. The pantry door was closed again, as if it had never been touched. Her father's voice did not follow. For now. The farmhouse was bulldozed 6 months later. The county records listed it as a public safety hazard, citing foundation collapse and dangerous mold. No official report mentioned the cellar. No one from the demolition crew admitted to seeing the hatch, though one worker told his wife he heard knocking from under the floorboards as the excavator tore through the kitchen. He refused to return to the site the next day. Claire left Austin soon after. She gave no formal interview, no statement to the press, despite local papers clamoring for her version of the night she and the others nearly died in the Harper house. The only public record of her time there remains in fragments, bits of her notebooks, smudged and water-damaged, found abandoned in her apartment after she vanished the following spring. In the margins of one page, scrawled hastily, were the words, "The pantry doesn't keep people. It keeps their choices." Detective Alan Price retired not long afterward. He lives quietly outside San Marcos, rarely seen. Neighbors say he avoids questions about the farmhouse, and when children in the neighborhood joke about the pantry that eats people, his face goes pale. Sheriff Halbrook refused to comment when asked about his part in the investigation. He transferred to another county. His colleagues whisper that he keeps a padlock on his own pantry door at home, though no one has been inside to see. And then there's the matter of the recorder. In December 2019, nearly 2 years after the farmhouse was leveled, a hunter stumbled across a small device half buried in the soil of a dried creek bed, 10 miles from where the house once stood. Its casing was cracked, its batteries corroded, but its memory card was intact. The audio began with static, then Claire's voice, trembling. October 7th, 2017. Final note, the Harper cellar is not empty. It is alive. It uses grief, memory, and voices of the lost. It demands a choice. The file ended with a single sharp sound, not static, not wind, but a knock. 3 knocks. No one has explained how the recorder traveled 10 miles, or why, when played on loop, listeners claim to hear something different each time. A whisper, a laugh, a voice they recognize from someone long dead. To this day, the farmland where the Harper house once stood lies vacant. Grass grows high, the foundation filled in, but locals refuse to step foot there. Some swear the ground is soft, like something shifting just beneath the soil. The pantry door was never found.